Imagine a lineage that stretches back centuries, a bloodline intertwined with some of the most ruthless monarchs in English history, a family tree that whispers of betrayal, secret alliances, and murders hidden behind palace walls. Now imagine that this lineage flows directly into the veins of one of the most beloved figures of the modern era, Princess Diana. But beneath her sparkling tiaras and radiant smile, could there have been shadows cast by a history darker than anyone ever imagined? The Tudors are remembered for their grandeur, their power, and their dramatic scandals. Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, Anne Boleyn, names that conjure visions of crowns, intrigue, and decapitated heads. History remembers the glamour, but few speak of the darker undercurrents, whispered curses, forbidden alliances, and a relentless hunger for control that bled into every generation. And Diana, the so-called People's Princess, might have inherited more than just a name. Could it be that the tragedy that defined her life, the turmoil, the betrayals, the ultimate heartbreak, was the inevitable outcome of centuries-old secrets? Tonight we peel back the layers of time, tracing Diana's lineage through shadowed corridors of power, to reveal a sinister legacy that the world never saw. You'll discover the whispers of a bloodline that may have shaped not just her fate, but the fate of those who dared to love her. If you enjoy hidden truths like this, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. But first, you have to understand where it all began. The story begins in the Tudor era, a time when England was a land of intrigue and danger, where allegiance could be bought and sold with a whisper, and the price of betrayal was often death. Henry VII and Henry VIII established a dynasty obsessed with lineage and legitimacy. The Tudors were masters of public image. Yet behind the tapestries and glittering crowns, a darker world thrived. Political marriages, secret alliances, and ruthless suppression of rivals weren't just political maneuvers, they were survival mechanisms in a world where a single misstep could cost you your life. Anne Boleyn, executed in 1536, serves as a stark reminder. She captivated a king, bore a future queen, and yet, within months, she lay decapitated on the scaffold. Every Tudor reign carried these hidden horrors, whispers of poison, imprisonment, and the systematic erasure of enemies. Power was inherited, but so too was the darkness that accompanied it. Historians often gloss over the hidden toll, focusing on coronations and triumphs, but the shadows between the crowns are where the real story lived. Centuries later, the echoes of that darkness ripple through the corridors of aristocracy. Families intermarried, consolidating wealth, influence, and bloodlines. One such family tree connects directly to the Spencers, Diana's ancestors. The Spencers were not merely nobility, they were heirs to a lineage intertwined with Tudor ambition and secrecy. Every generation inherited not just titles and estates, but the subtle, insidious traits that had ensured survival in Tudor courts: cunning, an acute sense of danger, and a willingness to manipulate from behind the scenes. In these halls, Diana's bloodline carries whispers of a past that modern England rarely acknowledges. Her ancestors moved through history as chess pieces, their marriages, births, and deaths meticulously orchestrated to maintain power and influence. Unlike the Tudors before them, there were secrets they guarded jealously, secrets that shaped destinies and, in some cases, destroyed lives. But it was one branch of this intricate lineage that would unknowingly set the stage for tragedy, and it all began with a marriage that seemed, at first, ordinary. But as we will see, the ordinary is often the most deceptive. Fast forward to the 20th century, Lady Diana Frances Spencer was born in 1961 into a world of privilege and expectation. The Spencers had long been entrenched in the English aristocracy, their estates vast, their lineage noble. But beneath the polished exterior of stately homes and formal dinners, a legacy of obsession and secrecy simmered. Diana's early life was shaped by this invisible inheritance, an unspoken pressure to maintain appearances, to marry well, to uphold the family name. Diana's beauty, charm, and seeming innocence quickly made her a subject of fascination within elite circles. By her teenage years, whispers of her future potential were already circulating in social circles that thrived on legacy and influence. Yet Diana herself was blissfully unaware of the deeper currents shaping her path. The Tudor shadow lurking in her bloodline remained a distant echo, seemingly dormant. The story took a dramatic turn when she met Charles, Prince of Wales. The match was more than romance. It was a union of two worlds, one steeped in modern royal duty, and the other haunted by centuries of carefully curated aristocratic legacy. In many ways, the marriage was predestined, orchestrated by lineage, expectation, and the invisible hands of those who understood that history often repeats itself. But the rise to prominence came with its own pressures. Diana's every move was scrutinized, her every smile documented. And yet, behind the glamour of royal appearances, the traits inherited from her Tudor-descended ancestors began to manifest: an acute sense of intuition, an awareness of danger, and an unspoken feeling that her life was being guided by forces far beyond her control. She was living a dream, yes, but it was also a carefully constructed stage. And on that stage, the shadows of her ancestry were not idle, they were waiting. Soon, the subtle signs became harder to ignore: betrayals in whispered conversations, unexplainable tensions, and a growing sense that the world around her was both intoxicating and perilous. Diana's rise to global prominence was meteoric, but it was also a warning, for history, as her bloodline seemed to suggest, does not easily forgive those who step into the limelight. And that warning would soon take a form far more dangerous than mere gossip or palace intrigue. The turning point in Diana's story came not in grand public moments, but in private betrayals. The fairy tale marriage to Prince Charles quickly revealed fractures that no amount of public charm could mask. Diana, accustomed to navigating the subtleties of aristocratic life, recognized patterns familiar from her family's past: the quiet manipulation, the strategic distancing, and the obsession with legacy over individual happiness. Behind palace doors, alliances shifted like sand. Trusted confidants became opportunists. Every interaction, every word, seemed weighted with history. Diana's instincts, honed by generations of Tudor-descended cunning, sensed the danger before others did. And yet, for all her awareness, she could not escape the inevitable: the repetition of tragedy that had haunted her bloodline for centuries. Obsessions intensified. Rumors of affairs, power struggles within the royal household, and relentless media scrutiny converged into a storm that would define her life. What began as a private unraveling became a public spectacle, exposing not just personal vulnerabilities, but the systemic pressures that aristocracy and monarchy had perfected over generations. Diana's life became a mirror reflecting centuries of inherited patterns, secrecy, betrayal, and the inescapable weight of expectation. It was during this period that the Tudor shadow loomed largest. The same blood that once flowed through Anne Boleyn and her contemporaries seemed to demand a reckoning. Diana's empathy, charm, and openness clashed violently with a system designed for control, discretion, and above all, survival at any cost. The turning point was not a single event, but a convergence of history, bloodline, and circumstance, a perfect storm in which personal choice and ancestral legacy collided. And as the storm gathered, Diana's life began to change in ways that no one could have predicted. The fairy tale was cracking, and what emerged from the fissures would reveal the darkest elements of her inherited lineage. The consequences were devastating, both public and private. Diana's struggles became headline news, a global obsession that reflected not just her personal anguish, but the enduring power of her bloodline. The pressure of living up to centuries of Tudor-descended expectation manifested in heartache, betrayal, and isolation. Even allies turned into adversaries, and every step forward seemed to be met with invisible barriers. Her personal battles with mental health, her fears for her children, and the relentless scrutiny of the world combined to form a crucible that tested her resilience. And yet, these struggles were not merely products of circumstance. They were echoes of history. Generations of inherited trauma, secrecy, and the strategic manipulation of family and fortune converged in her life, making her triumphs fleeting and her setbacks brutal. Ultimately, Diana's life ended in a tragic car crash, a moment that shocked the world and amplified the sense of historical inevitability that had haunted her lineage. Conspiracy theories flourished, fueled by the very secrecy and betrayal that had characterized her ancestors. Whether by fate, accident, or design, the tragedy reinforced the notion that the shadows of history are not easily escaped. The dark undercurrents of the Tudor bloodline had resurfaced with a force few could have anticipated. But the consequences extended beyond Diana herself. Her children, William and Harry, inherited not just her title and legacy, but the weight of centuries-old secrets. The ripple effects of the past, entwined with modern scrutiny, would continue to influence their choices, their vulnerabilities, and the pressures they faced as public figures. The dark legacy was not just a story of one life, but a cautionary tale about the enduring influence of history, blood, and inherited patterns of power. And yet, within this darkness, glimmers of hope remained, lessons waiting to be learned, truths waiting to be confronted. In the aftermath of Diana's death, the world mourned, but few paused to reflect on the deeper story, the centuries of lineage, secrecy, and inherited patterns that may have shaped her destiny. History, it seems, leaves footprints that echo far beyond the grave, and Diana's life serves as a haunting reminder of the forces that can shape human experience long before we take our first breath. Her children, raised amidst the glare of the public eye, continue to navigate a world fraught with the pressures of lineage. William and Harry carry both the love of a mother who defied expectation and the weight of a bloodline steeped in ambition, secrecy, and the relentless pursuit of survival. Diana's story is not merely about personal tragedy, but about the invisible threads of history, how centuries of hidden machinations can influence modern lives, often in ways that remain unseen. And perhaps the most important lesson is the human one. Beneath the crowns, the estates, and the historical intrigue, these are people first, vulnerable, flawed, and deeply affected by forces far larger than themselves. Diana's struggles humanize history itself, revealing the cost of ambition, secrecy, and inherited expectation. It reminds us that even those who appear most radiant may carry shadows that no public spotlight can erase. Her story challenges us to look deeper, to question the narratives of power and legacy, and to acknowledge the hidden truths that shape our world. Diana's life, marked by both brilliance and heartbreak, continues to captivate because it speaks to a universal truth. History is never truly behind us, and the legacies we inherit can be both a gift and a curse. Subscribe for more, share this story, and tell me in the comments what shocked you most. Because the story of Diana and her Tudor bloodline is far from over. It's a tale that reminds us all that the past has a way of reaching into the present, shaping destinies in ways we are only beginning to understand.